Hello and assalamu alaikum everyone. I hope all of you can hear me. If you can just confirm that before I start the proceeding for the day 4 of the webinar. Okay, thank you very much for that feedback. Hello and assalamu alaikum everyone. I am Kashif Kamran and I welcome you all to the day 4 of the Advanced Audit and Assurance Practice to Pass webinar for March 2021 exams being organized by ACCA Pakistan. Now, I believe that over the last 3 days, you must had productive learning on audit risk, ethical, professional, and quality control issues. And in the day 3 yesterday, you must had a good learning around audit reporting. Now, today is the day 4, another very exciting day because we are discussing another very important area on the day 4 of this webinar, which is basically the other assignments. Now, other assignments is a very, very important area. It's a regular feature of your exam paper and it contributes significantly to your success in the AAA paper. Now, how important other assignments are, I will be discussing them today and even tomorrow. On the day 5 also, we have other assignments alongside the knowledge areas. So it is a continued topic which will start today and will end tomorrow. Now, if I start proceeding towards my agenda for day 4, which is to look at the other assignments, which is an important area of the AAA syllabus. This is basically the syllabus area F, and the syllabus area F comes in section B, either in the question 2 or in the question number 3. So whenever you look at other assignments since the September 18 exams, when the format of the paper was changed, so you will see other assignments either in question 2 or 3, because that is how the syllabus area F comes in exam paper. So I hope you're all clear with the placement of other assignments in the AAA past paper, right? And now just before I proceed further, I hope my voice is clear to all of you, because I need to do this sound check in the first 15 minutes to ensure that everything is running in a smooth manner so that the session goes as productive as possible. If anyone has any sound issues, please you need to exit and come back to the webinar. Okay, thank you for the feedback on the sound effectiveness. Okay, so the day 4 agenda is the other assignments, and today the recommendable webinars which you should watch alongside the March 2021 webinar is the two webinars here. One is the September 19 webinar and one is the June 19 webinar, where I rigorously discussed the other assignments. So I believe September 19 and June 19 were very good webinars in terms of other assignments. So I would recommend you to watch these two webinars on other assignments along with the one you are taking today. So that will be a total of 3. Now the agenda for the day 4. There is just one article, forensic accounting, which will come in focus today because we will be discussing forensic accounting today as well. We will also be discussing the due diligence today, but there is no article on due diligence. So I will be guiding you the strategy for due diligence. So one article for today, then examiner expectations, the do's and don'ts, which we look for on every day. I hope you are developing the habit of reading the examiner reports. They are very, very productive and they really give you the do's and don'ts which you need to follow on the day of exam. In terms of the exam papers, I will be doing 2 exam papers today and both recent papers on the subject matters. I will be doing the September-December 19 question number 3, which is on forensic, and this is the most latest published question we have on forensic. And I will be doing the December 17 question number 3 on due diligence review, which is the most latest published paper on due diligence. Your home assignments will be to complete the questions I will be discussing with you in the webinar today and read the article and also watch the previous webinar. So that will be the agenda of your home assignments. So I hope all of you are clear on the agenda for day 4. Let's start understanding what we have in store on day 4 of this webinar. Now, before I start my proceedings, I want to take on my Word file, which I normally take for every webinar. So I just want to start. I just want to start with my support file I use every day. So today we are having the day 4 for other assignments. You can see that right in front of your screen. This is a Word file I'm using on a regular basis, and I keep posting this Word file every day on the WhatsApp group. Now, day 4 is about other assignments, and again, the same question, how to excel. Let's open the discussion. Now, first of all, how many other assignments you have in the syllabus? That's very important, right? So first of all, you should have a bit of idea about your syllabus, and you should exactly understand what we are covering in the webinar today and tomorrow. Now, if you look at the syllabus for other assignments, there are 4 other assignments in your syllabus. One is a review of prospective financial information. Then you have a due diligence review. Then you have a forensic audit, and then you have audit of performance information. So these are the 4 assignments you have in the syllabus area F of your AAA. Now, I will be covering the number 2, number 3, and number 4 in my webinar. Review of prospective financial information I have covered in my previous webinars, and I have already recommended my previous webinars to you to watch them. But in the webinar for March 21, I will be covering number 2, the due diligence, number 3, the forensic audit, and number 4, audit of performance information today and tomorrow. So the due diligence review will come on the day 4, which is today. The forensic audit will also come today on day 4, and the audit of performance information will come tomorrow. That's on the final day, the day 5. And review of prospective financial information, you can watch the previous webinars for that. And it even came in the last exam sitting December 2020, so have very less significance for March 2021 exams. So I hope you're clear on the syllabus perspective and the reason of choosing number 2, number 3, and number 4. Okay, now knowing the syllabus and knowing what other assignments you have in your paper, let's proceed with the discussion how to prepare them. Now, when you prepare other assignments, day 4, and on the day 4, when you need to prepare for other assignments, the 2 which we are doing today, how to prepare for other assignments. How to prepare for other assignments, right? Now we're preparing ourselves for 2 other assignments today, which is number 1, the due diligence, and number 2, we're preparing ourselves for forensic audit. Okay, let me put it in a form of a table that will be really helpful for your understanding. Okay, if I just put in a table, because we're discussing 2 today, one is due diligence. So if I take them in the column on the left, and the forensic audit, if I take that in the column on the right. Okay, let's start the journey. Now for due diligence, when you're preparing for due diligence, right, there is no article for due diligence, right? So you cannot read any article for due diligence. So there is no examiner article. Now, when you go for forensic has an examiner article, and I have already recommended that article, and it's already in the handout section of the webinar. That is forensic audit, and I will be discussing that, showing you that in the session today. So at least for forensic audit, you can read the article, and the article would be good enough. So there is no book reading. So no book reading, right, for forensic. But when you look at due diligence, obviously there is no article, so the knowledge you need to take will come from book reading. So you have to read the chapter on due diligence from either the BPP book or the Kaplan book, whichever you are following. So you have to go down into book reading. That's number 1. Now, once you know due diligence from a book reading, and once you know the forensic audit from the examiner article, and you have a clear mindset about what is a due diligence and what is a forensic audit, then you need to see what is the scope of this in your exam paper. What is the scope of due diligence? in the AAA paper. And the same question, what is the scope of forensic in the AAA paper? Now, how would you know that? It's so simple. When you want to investigate what is the scope of due diligence, how the examiner puts a question on due diligence, or how the examiner puts a question on forensic, then you need to visit the past papers, right? You need to rigorously solve the past paper. And one very important thing which you need to listen carefully is that there is a lot of repetition in other assignments. When you solve questions on other assignments, you will believe, or you will start to believe, that there is a lot of repetition. You will see that examiner keep repeating requirements or keep repeating the stuff in the case study in terms of other assignments. So there is a lot of repetition, So if you practice the past papers of due diligence in a very good manner and of forensic in a very good manner, you will you will try to relate them with the past papers with so much repetition. So I will be showing you how much repetition is there in these topics, and that will give you a very good mindset to practice all the past papers on these topics. So is that clear to all of you? So to understand the scope of due diligence and the scope of forensic, you need to do past papers. Now, how many past papers? If I say the recent 6 past papers, just like my day 1, day 2, and day 3, that will be unfair, because other assignments is not a topic which you will find in every exam sitting. So if I say recent 6, that would be unfair. Now, just listen to me carefully. If I say the recent 6 papers. You know the recent 6 papers, right? Starting from September 18 up to December 20. Now, if you look at the recent 6 papers from September 18 to December 20, there is no published due diligence question since September 18 to December 20. What will you do? You explore all the 6 papers, you will find not a single published question, on due diligence. Even though due diligence have come from September 18 to December 20, but you know ACCA makes a hybrid paper. They make a hybrid paper of March and June together. They make a hybrid paper of September and December together when they're uploading. So even though due diligence has been tested in the zone of September 18 to December 20, but the paper was not published. So what can you do? You have to go prior to September 18. Is that clear, everyone? So if you look at the recent 6 papers from September 18 to December 20, you will find no question on due diligence published. So that means for the first time, you have to go prior to September 18, right? So you need to do the past papers prior to September 18. Is that clear to everyone? The reason why you need to do the past papers prior to September 18, because you will find no published question in the tenure from September 18 to December 20. Now, when you look at the past papers prior to September 18, which past papers? Now, you will say that on the ACCA website, the past papers are only available from the 2017 exams. That's true. So you need to find the old past papers from somewhere. I will put those old past papers on the WhatsApp group after the end of the webinar. So you will find the old past papers on the WhatsApp group, because you have to do them, because there are no recent papers on due diligence. Now, the very earliest paper on due diligence was in December 17, which I will be doing today in the webinar. This will be discussed in the webinar today. But after this, if you go back, you will find a question on due diligence in December 15. And in December 15, it was a question number 3. Then you go back and you find a very good question in December 13 exams, the question number 2. And I would believe you should stop here. No going back further. But you have to do the 3 December papers, December 17, December 15, December 13. I'll put the December 15 and December 13 because they're very old paper and you will not be finding them on the ACCA website. So I'll put them on the WhatsApp group. Is that clear? But you have to do you have to do it on yourself, the December 15, and you have to do the December 13 on yourself. And the latest one, December 17, I will be doing this in the webinar. Is that clear? So when you do the past papers, will the past paper help you understand the scope of the due diligence, how question comes on due diligence, and what you should know from the book reading. So the book reading will only be helpful to all of you if you know the scope. But if you just read the book and you have no idea about the past papers, is that logical? The book reading will only be logical if you know the scope. So please ensure that when you are reading the book, you should know the scope of due diligence from the past paper. So then book reading will become very, very effective. So is that clear for due diligence? So no articles, a book reading is must. You should know the scope. When you look at the recent six papers, in the recent six papers, even though due diligence was tested, but you don't have any published question. So you have to go to the prior papers, December 17, 15, and 13, right? And I'll be sharing the marking schemes. Obviously, every day I am sharing that, right? And the marking schemes have not changed for due diligence. It is still the same, whether it is an old paper or a new paper, right? Okay, moving further. Come to forensic. Now, when you look at the recent six papers in terms of forensic, recent six papers from September 18 to December 20. The good thing is that you will find one question in the recent paper on forensic. One question is available, and which we will be doing today, which is September, December 19. September, December 19, question number 3. We will do this in the session today, in the webinar today. So at least when you look at the recent six papers, you will find one paper on one paper on forensic. Is that clear? Even though forensic has come more than once from September 18 to December 20. But the only published paper is September, December 19, which you can look for. So is there a need to go is there a need to go to the old papers? Yes, because one paper is insufficient when you're preparing yourself for March exams. So you have to take a reverse approach. You have to do the past papers prior to September 18. Which one? When you go prior to September 18, you should do the questions in the latest order. I think the first one will be June 15, and June 15 question number 3 was the first one where forensic came, and that was the C part, only the C part. Then you go back and you find a June 13 question, a question number 2B, and you stop here. So you will go to June 13. Now, if any one of you have a revision kit available, you will find them in the revision kit. But if you have no revision kit, don't be worried about it. I hope you all are on the WhatsApp group, right? Because I will be putting these old questions, December 15, December 13, June 15, and June 13 on the WhatsApp group. So you will get them with the answers, right? Is that clear to everyone? Okay, that's great. So have you been able to understood the column on the left and the column on the right? So you should know the past papers. Now tell me, why are we solving the old papers like June 15 and June 13? Or why are we solving old papers like December 15 and December 13? Because in the recent zone, either there are no questions or in the recent zone, there is only one question, right? Is that clear? Right? So that's how you go about it. So I hope the column on the left for due diligence and the column on the right for forensic will be helping you in terms of your preparation for exams. Okay, now how to prepare? Once you do the past papers, you do the self appraisal, right? You need to do that. I hope I don't need to repeat that. I've been repeating that since every day now, that you need to do a self appraisal and you need to reconcile your answers. You need to reconcile your answers. Yes, there has been no change in these areas since long, right? Syllabus has not changed for due diligence. Syllabus has not changed for forensic since last 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. So if you're doing old papers, nothing to worry about, right? You have to do a self appraisal, right? When you solve the papers. So you need to reconcile your answer with the examiner pointers, which are given in the marking scheme. So I'll share the answers with you of the old paper. And then more importantly, the examiner report. So I'll also share the old examiner reports with you, right? Nothing to worry about that as well. So when you do the old papers from 15 and 13 exams, I'll share with you the question paper, I'll share with you the answers, I'll share with you the examiner report. So you can do a self-appraisal. Is that clear to everyone? So don't be worried about how we will get the old papers, how we will get the old examiner reports, or how will we get the old marking schemes, right? Right? So I'll be sharing everything. So that's how you go about preparing yourself for the two areas today. Yes, that's exactly what I'm telling, right? That the past examiner reports will not be available for old papers. I will be sharing that with you because I already have my drive in which every past paper has been saved because I'm teaching this AAA paper for the last 13 years. So I even have very, very old AAA papers in my in my drive. So I'll be sharing that with you, right? You will not find them on the ACCA website, right? Okay, moving on. Let's start with the agenda now. How to start things up, how to prepare ourselves for due diligence and forensic today. So I'll take one by one each one of them and we'll go down exploring. Okay, let's first start with due diligence, the first topic. And up to the break, we'll do the due diligence, and after the break, we'll do forensic. Now, due diligence, which is one of the topic and one of the other assignments you should be good at. Let's see what you should be knowing about. You have no articles, so I cannot show you any articles. You just need to rely on the tutor knowledge and you need to go down reading the book after the webinar ends today. Now, the latest question which we will be practicing on due diligence today will be December 17, question number 3, but I have already recommended you that you have to practice questions on yourself, and the questions on the self will be December 15 and December 13, which you will do on yourself, and I'll be sharing them. Now, what is due diligence? What you should know about due diligence, how a question comes on due diligence, what the examiner expects from you in a due diligence. Let's put them down here. Examiner expectations, scope from the past papers. Now, if any one of you have seriously spent time on due diligence, preparing yourself for March exams, whether you are repeating the AAA paper or you're giving the AAA paper for the first time, I believe you were studying before the webinar. You didn't started to study from today, right? You were studying, but this webinar is just helping you. So I hope you must have seen the due diligence topic prior to the webinar, and you must have explored this topic because exams are very near. So when you look at the scope of this topic from the past paper and examiner expectation, whether that was a December 13 question, whether that was a December 15 question, or whether that was a December 17 question, all these questions had something very common. Examiner mostly ask for mostly ask for matters in a due diligence question. And these are not the matters we were discussing yesterday, materiality and treatments and risk. No, these are matters relating to due diligence, which should be extracted from the case study. So these are not the matters where you start to find the materiality and you start to find the treatment, just like the word matter we came across yesterday in a reporting class. No, these are matters for due diligence, and you need to find them from a case study. This is a very frequently asked requirement in a due diligence. Then in due diligence, the examiner also asks you to write additional information, and I've covered them in my previous webinar, so you can watch them and you will be very happy. Nothing to worry about. So additional information is another requirement which comes a couple of times in the past papers from due diligence. So you should know exactly how to write it. Okay. I hope my voice is clear to everyone. Okay, that's great, right? So anyone having a voice issue, you need to disconnect and reconnect again. So examiner asks for matters in a due diligence question, asks for additional information in a due diligence question. Examiner also asks for procedures in a due diligence question. And most of the time, examiner also asks for knowledge in a due diligence question, which will come from the book. What sort of knowledge? I think in all the three exam settings, no, not all the three exam settings, in two exam settings, examiner has asked for the benefits of due diligence for 6 marks. Now see, this is a book knowledge. Any one of you who must have read the book know the benefits of a due diligence knowledge. Examiner has also asked for the difference between an audit of financial statement and a due diligence review. Now, see, this is knowledge. What is the difference between performing a due diligence review and an audit of a financial statement? That was also tested in the past paper for, I guess, for I think for 4 marks. And another knowledge which was tested in the past paper was the purpose. What is the purpose of due diligence? And this was also tested for 2 marks in the past papers. So, a lot of knowledge. So, I hope you realize that when you are reading the book, from the book, you should know the purpose of due diligence. From a book, you should know what's the difference between an audit and a due diligence. And from a book, you should also know what is the benefit of a due diligence. So that's what you will be exploring from reading the book. Now, lots of things which are application. Matters is an application. You cannot have a rote learning of matters. Additional information is a conceptual area which needs to be applied to a case study. Procedures is to be applied to a case study. So lots of things in due diligence comes from the case, and the few things which comes from the book. So I hope that will help you determine the scope of due diligence from the past paper. I'll be exploring matters with you today, but you need to watch my previous webinars for additional information, and you need to watch my previous webinars for the knowledge areas. So in my webinar today, I'll be focused on matters, and in my webinar today, I'll be focused on procedures. And for additional information, you need to watch the previous recommended webinars. Is that clear to everyone? Because we have one question today, which is December 17. So in December 17, we have procedures and we have matters, which I will be discussing with you. Okay, now moving one step closer to the practice of due diligence. Once I start the practice, I'll guide you the marking scheme, right? Now, you need to understand one thing very carefully, that when we say a due diligence review, is where the auditor help the buyer, in providing, where the auditor help the buyer with adequate and relevant information so that the buyer can take a decision to buy the company, and the buyer can take the decision for determining the purchase consideration. So that's what you do in a due diligence. The auditor help the buyer. When you perform a due diligence, if you have an idea of that, that's good. That when you perform a due diligence review, it is basically the auditor helping the buyer, providing them the information about whom? Information about the seller. So this is acquisition, right? This is acquisition. The buyer is buying a company. So it's basically the merger acquisition. So when you read the case, in the case, you will be the auditor of the buyer, and the buyer is interested in buying a company. Is that clear to everyone? So it's where the auditor help the buyer with adequate and relevant information about the seller, so that the buyer can take a decision to buy a company. So the buyer can take a decision, that's important, and the buyer can determine the purchase consideration. At what price? At what price you will buy the company? Who will determine that? The auditor or the buyer? Who will determine the price? The price will be determined by the buyer, not the auditor. What will auditor do? Auditor will only provide adequate and relevant information. So that's what the auditor is basically doing. So the auditor is providing adequate and relevant information to the buyer. The second thing you should know about due diligence is that the auditor in due diligence focuses on determining determining or finding information which helps with the fair value of net assets. Do you believe when there is an acquisition of a company, the fair value of a net asset is very important? Because from the purchase consideration, if you minus the fair value of net asset, what you get? Answers. From the purchase consideration, if you minus the fair value of net asset, what you get? Wonderful answers. Goodwill. So, do you believe purchase consideration is the decision of the buyer? But who will help buyer with the fair value of net asset? Who will guide buyer on the fair value of net asset? Who? Who will tell buyer the fair value of net assets? The auditor. Wonderful answer. Good answers. Excellent. So that means you're all mentally present. So the auditor is in a due diligence focuses on determining or focuses on finding information which helps with the fair value of net asset. And do you believe the fair value of net asset will help the buyer in determining the purchase consideration? That will give a very good idea to the buyer how much price to pay. So that's exactly what you do in a due diligence. So do you believe due diligence is very beneficial for the buyer? It helps the buyer to take a decision. And do you understand the scope of a due diligence, that the auditor is finding information which can be helpful to the buyer in taking a decision, not just the fair value of the net asset, any information. So it could be control weaknesses, it could be problems, it could be issues. Because do you believe the buyer wants to know everything about the seller before he decides to buy it? So is adequate and relevant information important? So will the buyer likes the auditor to provide him the adequate and relevant information? So will the auditor be sharing? Auditor will be sharing, sorry. Auditor will be sharing all information about seller with buyer, because that will be helpful, right? And all information means what? Means information about for example, issues, problems, control weaknesses, any any problems in the supply chain, any problems in the business models, any problem in the business models, etc. So just 1 minute. So you, as an auditor, you need to share a lot of information with the buyer about the problems and issues and control weaknesses, and the list goes on, right? There might be legal cases against the seller which you need to find out. There might be some cash flow problems facing the seller which you need to tell. There might be some financial issues facing the seller which you need to tell, and the list goes on, right? There might be some obsolete products which the seller is selling. There might be some information about obsolete products. There might be some information about the market share of the seller, etc. So I cannot write the full list, right? Okay, so is this summary helping you understand exactly what is a rough scope of due diligence? Because I cannot start reading a chapter with you in the webinar, right? My purpose is to do practice. But will that help you find a solution when you read the book? Do you exactly know how to read the book? Okay, so that's good. So let's just put this as a summary of what is due diligence. And I hope this summary will help you to explore more from the book. Okay, now let's do a past paper. Let's exactly see how you can help buyer in taking a decision to buy a company or not. So if you're clear with all this, everyone, let's do the drilling of the past paper. Okay, let's drill December 17, question number 3. That will help you understand it in a more effective manner. Okay, now down towards the drilling. Okay, I'm putting the December 17 paper in front of you. Question number 3A. I hope all of you can see that in front of your screen now. Question number 3A from the December 17 exams. Can you see that in front of your screen? Just please confirm that. Okay, that's great. Now, let's look at the requirements. What are requirements? There are 2 requirements, each of 6 marks. Let's see what the requirement is. The requirement says, in respect of the 2 methods identified above, in respect of the 2 methods identified above, 2 methods identified above. Okay, can you see the 2 methods identified above? Examiner has given you the numbers 1 and 2. So can you see the 2 methods above here? So in respect of the 2 methods above, what you need to do? Explain why each matter requires further investigation as part of the due diligence review. Why each matter above requires further investigation? Who will do this further investigation? Who will do this further investigation? Who you are in this case study? Exactly, the auditor, not the buyer. The auditor is helping the buyer, right, with this further investigation, right? So who is performing the due diligence? The auditor. So who will do the further investigation? Obviously, the auditor. It's not the management responsibility to do the investigation, right? It is the auditor responsibility to do the investigation. So I hope you're all clear on that, right? So how many matters we have? Two. And for every matter, what we need to tell examiner? We need to tell examiner that why each matter requires further investigation. Why you need to investigate the matter further. How many marks we have for that? 6. Okay, then look at the next point. Recommend procedures to be performed. How many marks we have for procedures? 6 marks. So we have 6 marks for explaining why each matter requires further investigation, and we have 6 marks for writing procedures. Now, before we read the case, every day what I do with you is you should know how to read the requirement. And that's exactly what I want to show you, how you go down reading the requirement. So if I just copy the requirement on my main file, which I will be sharing with you right here, let's investigate the requirement. Now the examiner says in respect of the 2 matters above. So how many matters we have in the case study? 2 matters. Have the examiner given us that? Yes, above. Explain why each matter requires further investigation. So we have a matter 1, whatever that is. We have a matter 2. So we have 6 marks. So will I give 3 marks to the matter 1 and will I give 3 marks to the matter 2? Because in the first requirement, explain why each matter requires further investigation is worth 6 marks. So you are understanding the split 3 and 3? So why each matter requires further investigation? Matter number 1, why it requires further investigation. And the same, why it requires further investigation, matter number 2. So every matter in a due diligence question is worth how many marks? Why it requires further investigation? Every matter in a due diligence question is worth 1.5 marks. No, not 1 mark. It is not a reporting question. It is not a risk question. 1.5 marks, right? So how many why? How many why I need to tell for matter number 1 and how many why I need to tell for matter number 2? I have 3 marks for matter number 1, right? So if I write one y, how many marks will I get? 1.5. If I write the second y, how many marks will I get? 1.5. So 1.5 marks per y. Is that clear to everyone? Per y. And again, 1.5 marks per y. Is that clear to everyone? So 6 marks between the matter 1 and the matter 2 and why each matter required further investigation. So when you say why, for every why, you will be getting 1.5 mark because this is a question on due diligence. So who made the marking scheme? The examiner. I cannot do anything with that. Then the second thing, procedures. How many marks we have for procedures? 6 marks. And you know the marking scheme for a procedure is 1 mark per procedure wherever they're asked in the AAA paper. 1 mark per procedures. So how many procedures you need to write? 6 total procedures to score the 6 marks. So that's how you go down drilling the requirement. I think this is every day I'm doing this with you, that I tell you how to break and read the requirement. And I believe this helps to know exactly what is to be done. Now look at the question. Doesn't the question seem simple that we have a matter 1 and for matter 1 I need to tell why this requires further investigation? So simple. Then the matter 2, why it requires further investigation. Finish. Then I need to write 6 procedures. Now, investigation, further investigation. Now, who is doing the further investigation? Obviously, the auditor when you read the case. An auditor is doing the further investigation for what reason? Why is he doing the further investigation? To help the buyer, right, with taking a good decision. So do you believe when you do the further investigation, it will help the buyer? It will help the buyer in taking a sound decision, right? So if you're clear with the situation, let's start reading the case. Read the case and let's find the solution. Let's find the solution. Next point. Okay, let's read the matter number one. Okay, I'm giving you 2 minutes. If you can start reading from you are a manager and you can start reading up to the zebra company, the para 1 and the para 2, before I discuss with you the other paras. So you have 2 minutes. Please start reading the para 1 on your screen and the para 2 on your screen. And once you are read with it, please drop in the chat box done. I'm waiting for your answers. Start reading. 2 minutes. Okay, you just need to read the para 1 and para 2, right? So there is no sense of scrolling down because the para 1 and 2 is on the screen, right? You just need to read the first two paragraphs, Dureshevar. Okay, if you've read the first two paragraphs, I hope the first two paragraphs introduce to you who you are. So you are a manager in the audit department of the Leopard company, and you are responsible for performing a due diligence review for your client, which is the cheetah company, right? They're all animals here. So we have the Leopard company as being the audit firm. You are currently performing a due diligence review for your client, and the name of your client is Cheetah Company. And Cheetah is the buyer, right? True, false? Is Cheetah Company the buyer, right? And is Zebra Company the seller? So the auditor is performing a due diligence review of zebra or cheetah. You are finding information about zebra or cheetah. Exactly, the zebra, right? Zebra is the seller. You're performing a due diligence of zebra, and you need to provide information about zebra to whom? You need to provide information about zebra to cheetah. Good. Okay. The next paragraph. The engagement is to conduct. The engagement is to conduct the financial and operational diligence of Zebra. So you will be performing the financial due diligence of Zebra. Is it financially viable or not? Or is it operationally viable or not of Zebra, a company which has been identified as a potential acquisition by Cheetah Company? As part of the due diligence review, you have been asked to provide the valuation of the Zebra Company assets and liabilities and an analysis of the company's operating profit forecast. Can you understand that this is your scope? What you need to do as Leopard, what you need to do? You have been asked to provide the valuation of the Zebra company assets and liabilities and an analysis of the operating profit, which will help the buyer in determining the appropriate purchase price for Zebra. So, are you determining the price? No, which will help the buyer in determining the purchase price for Zebra. So, I'm just copying your scope here, which is important information. What is your scope as Leopard? Your scope as Leopard is what? Your scope as Leopard is this, which I just copied from the case study, which will help me when I'm writing my why answer. So my scope is that I need to perform the fair value of the assets and liabilities and I also need to work upon the company's operating profit forecast. So you have been asked for that. Now see how this will help me when I start to write my why answer. Okay, back to the case study. Okay, during the engagement fieldwork, you have identified two matters which requires further considerations. Two matters, matter number one and matter number two. Now, when you're reading the matter number one and two, keep in mind your scope. What is your scope? Your scope is valuation of the Zebra assets and liabilities, and your scope is analysis of the company's operating profit. Profit historical or profit future? The fair value of the net assets and an analysis of the company's operating profit forecast, future profits, right? Okay, now keeping that in mind, can you just read the meta number one on the screen, right from while reviewing to the last line here? Just the meta one, right? Not the last meta, only the meta one, and see what can you identify why you need to further investigate this meta. You will do the meta two yourself, right? As an assignment. I will do the meta one with you in the session. See what is the problem with meta one, why you need to further investigate it. I'm giving you 2 minutes to read it. Just one last minute, right? If anyone is still reading the meta number one, we need to do a drilling on the meta number one shortly. Okay, if you've read it, that's wonderful. Let's start the analysis. Okay, can you see I've copied the meta number one on my Word file? And how many marks we have for meta number one after the 6 marks? 3. So we need to explain why meta number one requires further investigation, right? So let's start this. So examiner wants us to explain. Just let me take this to my next page because we have less space. Sorry, we have less space to write the answer here. So if I can just take it to the next page and start the answer, that would be good. Okay, right from here, let's start the answer. So we need to basically write why meta 1 requires further investigation. Is that what the examiner was asking? Investigation, right? Okay. Why meta 1 requires further investigation? I will write 2 paragraphs, each of 1.5 marks. I'll put the heading meta 1 in the exam, and I'll start writing under meta number 1. Okay, now concentrate. While reviewing correspondence with the customer in relation to the outstanding receivables, one of sorry one of the team found a letter from a large retailer from which Zebra company produces for which Zebra company produces a number of unique products. So the Zebra company produce number of unique products for this particular customer. Can you see this word unique products? So for this particular customer, you are making unique products, providing advanced notice that they're not renewing their purchasing agreement when the current one expires. So this particular customer, will this customer be working with you in future? No, this customer will not be working with you in the future, right? Is that clear? So this customer will not be working for you with you in future, and you were making unique products for him. The customer advise that they're switching to a new entrant. They are switching to a new entrant in the market who is substantially cheaper than Zebra. So what is the reason why this customer don't want to continue with you from the next year? Because he's switching to an alternative which is cheaper than Zebra, right? A brief analysis identified that the customer provides on average, almost on average. Sometime might be more, sometime it might be less, but on average, the customer provides 5% of the Zebra annual revenue. So how much is the contribution of this customer to your total revenue? Almost, on average, 5%. Sometime it might be more, sometime it might be less, because it says on average almost 5% of Zebra company annual revenue. Do you believe it's an important customer for Zebra which they are about to lose, and you are making unique products for this customer? Now, what is the scope? My scope is to look at the valuation of the assets and liability, number one. Can you see that on your screen? And my second scope is the operating profit forecast. So that's where I need to focus on, right? Now, do you believe the meta number one connects with the valuation of assets and liability? And the meta number one also connects with the operating profit forecast. Do you believe if this customer is lost and will be lost, will this impact your future sales and will this impact your future profits? Finding an alternative might be difficult, and there might be more customers who will switch. Not just this, if one customer switch, do you believe it will open a trend for the others to switch as well? So can it brings an impact on your future operating profits and your sales, right? So will it impact the operating profit forecast for future? Exactly, right? Good answers. Okay, what about assets and liability? Do you believe you are making unique products for this customer? And there might be some products in the inventory pertaining to this customer. Should you write down those products? Because if they are unique products, can they be sold to any other customer? Can they be sold to any other customer? No. So should we write those inventory down? Is inventory part of assets? Okay, unique products. If Zebra is producing, can you see this word produce? Produce means manufacture. So if Zebra is manufacturing unique products for this customer, do they have specific plant and machinery to manufacture these unique products, which is for particular customer? They produces a number of products, right? Unique produces. Can you see this word produces? So does that means it is also an indicator that the plant and machinery which produces these unique products should be tested for impairment? And is impairment part of the valuation of the assets and liabilities? Are you understanding? So one is the unique inventory, one is the unique products, and one is the produces. I hope you're finding both underlined words on the screen, right? So let's see. I'm writing more than 6 marks answer here, just on the meta number one. But see if you can track that and you can take this to the next one. Number one meta. Meta number one. First, let's do a brainstorming. The meta number one produces. Produces means Zebra must be having specific plant and machinery for making unique products for this customer, and the advance notice from the customer to suspend the contract is an indicator for impairment for these plant and machineries. So is that fine? I'm just making a brainstorm answer here before I write a proper answer. So are you all clear on this? So I picked this word from the paper, produces. I linked produces with plant and machinery. That Zebra must be having some plant and machineries which produces this specific inventory for the customer. And because they've given you an advance notice, this advance notice is becoming an indicator for impairment, and the plant and machinery should be tested for impairment. Now, obviously, this matter requires a further investigation because impairment will be impacting upon the fair value of the net assets. Impairment will impact on the fair value of net assets. And the auditor should be concerned about it during this due diligence review. So should you be concerned about whether the management has done the impairment or not in this due diligence review? Is that the reason this matter requires a further investigation? Do you agree with the first point? Then look at the second point, unique products. Unique products. Now, when you look at the unique product point, you link this with inventory. There might be unsold inventory at the year end pertaining to this customer, which should be written off as they cannot be sold to any other customer because it was specific to this customer. There might be unsold inventory, might be at the year end pertaining to this customer, which should be written off as it cannot be sold to any other customer, which will impact the inventory valuation, and the overall fair value of net assets. Is that clear? So see how I pick points? When you're reading the case, I pick the word produces and I connect that with plant and machinery as part of assets. Unique products, I picked that word and connected that with inventory as part of assets. And that's not the end. The next thing, switching to a new entrant, and it's 5% of the total revenue. Now, if it is 5% of the total revenue, switching to new competitor. Now, do you believe this new competitor is a threat to your future profits? The new competitor is a threat to the is the threat for Zebra future profits and sales, because there is a risk that other customers can also switch in future following the trend of one of the customer. Is that clear? Everyone, is that clear? So switching, do you believe switching will impact your future profits and sales? There might be more customers who might switch, which will impact your future profits and sales. And if you are losing this customer, right, which is 5%, right? Losing the 5% customer who is contributing 5% to your sales. So will you have an immediate impact? This will have an immediate impact on future profits and sales if any alternative is not found, timely found. So do you believe there are so many matters you can explain under the first matter, but how many marks we just have for the first matter? 3. So the maximum we need to explain under matter 1 is 2 why answers. Any 2 why answers out of the 4 I wrote. But this is just a rough idea of how you can go about it. So do you find that the matters cannot be rote learned? You will go to the exam hall, you get a question on due diligence, and in a due diligence question you have a matter. The matter will be in the case study, and the matter pertains to whom? The matter pertains to a buyer or a seller? The matter pertains to a buyer or seller? The matter pertains to a buyer? No, the matter pertains to a seller. Were these matters of zebra or were these matters of cheetah? What happened to all of you? Were these matters of zebra? Is zebra a buyer or is zebra a seller? So whose matter was this? Zebra, right? So whose matter will be given in the exam paper? Will the examiner give you the matters of the buyer in the exam paper or the matter of the seller in the exam paper? Definitely seller, right? Now that's better. That's better. So you will read the case and you will find the matters of the sellers, right, from the case study. And you will explain examiner why each matter is important to a buyer. So do you believe the matter pertaining to one of the customers switching is an important matter for buyer, is an important issue for buyer? And will the buyer be interested in knowing what will be the future implication of this on the business of Zebra, right? So they cannot be rote learned, right? Right? Is that great? Okay, fine. So will you be continuing with the meta 2 yourself, right? Meta 2, in the same way, that is your assignment. Do it yourself and reconcile, correct? Okay, procedures. Now, so many procedures can come out. We just had the meta number 1. And for the meta number 1, can I write procedures for meta number 1? The first, should I discuss with management whether they have performed the impairment review for the plant and machinery or not? Because that was my concern factor. So can I convert that to my procedure? Discuss with the Zebra management, discuss with Zebra management whether they have performed, whether they have performed any impairment review for the plant and machinery specific to the customer. Now, if they say yes, we have performed, you will review the Zebra impairment working. You will review the Zebra impairment working to ensure that the recoverable amount is correctly determined. Do you believe recoverable amount is very subjective? So the auditor wants to ensure that the recoverable amount is correctly determined and the impairment loss is correctly recognized. The impairment loss is correctly recognized. Correctly recognized, right? Yes, procedures can be written in bullets, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, as I'm writing. This is the correct way of writing the procedures, right? This is not a skeleton answer. This is the correct answer, correct way of writing the procedures. Okay. Do you understand how I wrote procedures? I discussed with Zebra whether they've performed impairment. Is that valid procedure looking at my first bullet? Is that a valid procedure looking at my first bullet? And if the management has done it, should I review the working? Okay, number 2, unique products. Should I review the inventory valuation or should I review the inventory report to confirm whether there are any unsold inventory, whether there are any unsold inventory pertaining to the specific customer? So should I look at the reports of the inventory which management prepares on a monthly basis to confirm whether there are any unsold inventory pertaining to the specific customer? And should I then review the inventory valuation to confirm that the particular inventory has been written down or has been written off? Is that clear? So every matter can be converted to a procedure because to confirm that matter or to do a further investigation, you require a procedure, right? Can I also review the future? Can I review the sales forecast? Can I review the sales forecast to confirm uh, the decline in sales in future, considering there is a loss of a customer? So can I review the management sales forecast to confirm what estimates have they taken into account on the basis of losing a 5% customer? So review the sales forecast to confirm the decline in sales in future, considering a potential loss of customer, right? Just I got 5 on only one matter. You need to make 6 in total for matter 1 and matter 2. So are you finding the clue? I'm giving you I'm giving you more answer here, right? But you need to find less. But is this procedure helping you? Procedure start with the verb discuss, review, review, review. You cannot start a procedure without a verb, without an action. Every time a procedure has to start with an action. Discuss is an action, review is an action. Action means you're doing something. So My procedure started with action, right? Yes, exactly. I have covered that in my previous webinar, ASP, action, source, purpose. Your procedure should have an action and your procedure should have a purpose for it to be good, for it to be good. So if you are writing a procedure in the exam paper which does not have a purpose, it's useless. If you are writing a procedure in the exam paper which does not have an action, like discuss, like review, like recalculate, it's useless. Yes, a lot of you are giving me valid procedures. Yes, you can write those valid procedures. They're perfectly fine. You can also recalculate the impairment on the basis of the management working. You can also review correspondence with the other customers to confirm whether other customers are willing to switch. So you can also review correspondence with other customers. Are other customers willing to switch as well, or only it is this customer who is willing to switch? So will you complete this answer? Method number two in the same way. And how many procedures you need to write in total for both? 6. I've already given you 5 for just one. So for the sake of practice, you can write more, but in the exam, you have to stick to the way you need to write it. So is that clear on due diligence? Right. I hope you found it effectively. Now, one of the few things I need to discuss around due diligence, which is very, very important, is that just because we got this topic procedures, you need to ensure that I've covered this in my previous webinar, a good procedure. A good procedure is the one which have an action, which have a source, and which have a purpose. So if you have a good procedure in exam, that will give you 1 mark. Good procedure is equal to 1 mark, and a weak procedure is equal to half a mark. So for example, if I can just do a scanning, first one, and I just tell you what is a good procedure. First one, my own procedure. Let's critically appraise my own procedure. Discuss with zebra management. Discuss. What is discuss? Discuss is the action. Discuss is the action. Clear? With zebra management. Zebra management is the source. Zebra management is the source. Management is a very journal word, right? Never use the word management in the exam paper. Never use the word management in the exam paper. Specify the name of the company to make it particular to the case study. A lot of times students say the management. No, the alpha company management, the cheetah company management, the leopard company management, the zebra company management. Make it more specific. Is that clear? So discuss with zebra management. So zebra management is the source. Purpose. Why are we discussing with zebra management? What is the purpose? What is the purpose? The purpose is whether they have performed any impairment review. Is that the purpose? Is that the purpose? Whether. So whether is the purpose, right? What you need to confirm? Whether. And you continue whether. So does my procedure has the action, a source, and a purpose? So will the examiner reward me 1 here? Yes. Look at the next thing. Review the inventory valuation. Look at this one last. Review the inventory valuation. So what is the action? The action is review the inventory valuation. What are we reviewing? What is the subject matter? What is the subject matter which we are reviewing? We are reviewing the inventory valuation. So the inventory valuation becomes the source. So an easy thing which you can remember for exam paper, source is equal to the subject matter on which you are performing a procedure. Source is equal to a subject matter on which you are performing a procedure. Like inventory valuation is the subject matter. Review the inventory valuation. What's the purpose? To confirm. The moment you look at this word to confirm means that is the purpose. Slash to confirm. Continue. So you can do a appraisal of your procedure you write at home. If you can do a self appraisal of your procedure and you do a self appraisal that my procedure have an action, my procedure have a source, my procedure have a purpose, will that help you on the day of exam? So a good procedure have an A, good procedure has an S, and a good procedure has a P. Is that clear to all of you? And I've covered this in my previous webinars. You can watch them because this is not a webinar on procedures. But because we got a topic procedure, so I thought it's better to give you an idea about procedure. I hope that was helpful to all of you. Right, so now you need to do this question and you need to do the old papers from December 15 and December 13. I'll be sharing the old papers with you so that you can do them. You can read the examiner reports, and you can also not just read the examiner report, you can also look at the marking schemes, right? So is due diligence effective to all of you? Will you continue the track of due diligence? Will you watch the previous webinars on due diligence? Will you read the book for due diligence, right? So has this 1 hour or more than 1 hour discussion made a right track for you? Will you follow this right track over the next few weeks for due diligence, preparing it? Okay, that's great. So I hope the first 70 minutes of this webinar was effective. I'm continuing and I'll give you a break after some time. So we are still into the webinar, right? No break currently. We are switching the topic. We are switching the topic from due diligence to a much broader topic, which is known as forensic. And I need to give you some theoretical aspects of forensic because there is an article which will take a bit of time, and then we'll go to September, December 19 paper, and we'll spend time on September, December 19 paper, just like we spent on December 17, so that you get a very good track. Just before I switch the topic, I hope uh, you're all clear on this table in front of your screen. Can you see the table in front of your screen, everyone? Okay, on the left-hand side of the table, due diligence, book reading, due diligence, scope of due diligence, you should know that. Recent 6 papers, no questions. Past papers prior to September 18, December 17, we have done in the webinar. And you need to do December 15 and December 13 yourself. I'll be sharing that with you on the WhatsApp group. So the column on the left is done. We'll now start with the column on the right, which is forensic, right? So have your mindset improved on due diligence prior to the session and now in the session? When you entered the session, did you had a blur idea or a bit of misconceptions, which this session has mitigated so far? Have you able to improve your mindset and your confidence level on due diligence? Right? That's great. Okay, now just before I give you a break, I just want to take one quick intro of forensic because I just need to see how much time we have to fit in forensic, right? So just one 5 minutes discussion and I'll give you a break. Forensic audit, which is the next topic. Now, in terms of the forensic audit as a topic, you need to understand that yes, there is a recent paper, there is an article, so it's better in terms of understanding. There is an examiner article which is so very important, and I'll be reading that with you in the session today so that you get an knowledge. So the examiner article will help you with the knowledge and also help you with the scope. Then obviously we have a recent paper to practice today, and the recent paper practice is September December 19, a question number 3, which is for 25 marks. So that's a long question, different parts of the question. Some relates to forensics, some don't. But we'll go through all the 25 marks, right? So that's how we will be going on forensic. Uh, I'll be sharing with you a lot of knowledge on forensic because that's very important and the different parameters of forensic. So if you want to take a break now, you can take it now. It's like 9:45 p.m. in terms of the Pakistan time. So we can take a 15 minutes break and we'll resume back at 10. Is that clear, everyone? So take a break for 15 minutes. We'll start fresh topic forensic after the break at 10, and from 10 to the end of the webinar, we'll just keep our focus on forensic knowledge and practice. So we have 90 minutes to put on forensic, which is good enough. We already put like 75 minutes on due diligence. So we're giving a better time to forensic, 90 minutes, right? Okay, so we'll be resuming with that, right? So, okay, I can freeze my screen on the due diligence points. Okay. Should I freeze my screen here, Umar Khan? Should I freeze it here? Okay, that's great. Okay, off to a break, everyone, and we'll resume in 15 minutes. Please be back at 10 p.m. Is that clear to everyone? I'm putting this in the chat box. Break till 10 p.m. Okay, that's wonderful, Debia. If you don't leave the computer, so that's wonderful that you stick to the screen. We'll resume at 10 for forensic. I hope you had an effective learning today. If you can just drop your quick feedback for the first part of the day 4, and I hope the other assignments will continue even on the day 5 tomorrow. So you will have a lots of learning for other assignments in the March 2021 webinar. Okay, have a cup of tea, have a cup of coffee, come back to the session in 15 minutes, and we'll resume back with the discussion on forensic. I'm muting myself, right? Okay, welcome back, everyone. Just a confirmation that all of you can hear me and my voice is clear to all of you. So we can start with the last 90 minutes of this webinar for day 4. Okay, that's great. If you can all hear me and you can see the screen in front of you, which is the day 4 other assignments, right? So let's start on with the discussion. We had a discussion on due diligence prior to the break, and now post break, I want to spend time on forensic and take into account the recent paper, September December 19, and also the criticism of the examiner. So let's resume back from forensic audit and let's spend time on it. Now, if I take on my Word file for forensic, which we just prepare prior to the break, we need to spend a bit of time on examiner article, perhaps something like 15 to 20 minutes to take knowledge, and then apply that knowledge to the exam paper. And I will be guiding you about the requirements and the marking scheme in over the 1 hour time. Okay, let's start the journey. Let's first explore the article and let's first explore the knowledge that is all you need to know about forensic. Now, I'll be reading some selected paragraphs from the article uh, to give you the right track that you need to read the article, because if I will not read the article or I'll not show you the track of the article, I believe the students take articles too casually or too lightly. But I want to do it in the session today to reinforce that how important knowledge you can get from reading of the article. So let's start that. Okay, now the article forensic, if I can show you that, which is right here. You can see that in front of your screen now. This is the article by the title of Forensic Accounting, which is shared in the handout section of the webinar. Now, I'll be reading the selected pages particularly, and I will be telling you, particularly this article, the page number three onwards, right? That is from here. Page number 3 onwards is important. So you have to ensure that you read everything from page number 3 onwards. Is that clear? And I will be giving you some extracts from page number 3 onwards on my Word file, which you can take as your notes from the webinar. So from page number 3 onwards, right? The first and the most important thing which the examiner has covered in the article from page number 3 onwards, I've just taken a summary of that from the article to my Word file, which I just want to share with you and read through with you quickly. Just give me 1 minute. This will become your class notes. Just 1 minute. I need to copy that from here and put it down to my main file. Okay, that is it. Okay, you can see the summary, right? I just took it from the article, the page number 3 and the page number 4. See what the examiner is telling us. Look at the first para and keep your focus strong. Forensic accounting. Forensic accounting engagements are agreed upon procedures. So they are agreed upon procedures, right? A lot of times the student use this word agreed upon procedure. So forensic is an agreed upon procedure, not an assurance engagement. So it is not an assurance engagement, right? It is an agreed upon procedure engagement. That means it does not have any level of assurance. You give no assurance when you're offering forensic. The forensic accountant will not provide the forensic accountant will not provide an assurance opinion. That is the role of the auditor when reviewing the amount of loss included in the financial statement. So auditor expresses an opinion, right? So when you are performing a forensic audit or a forensic accounting, this is an agreed upon procedure. So in an agreed upon procedure is not an assurance engagement. So because it's not an assurance engagement, so you are not offering any opinion, you're not offering any assurance. Yes, in a due diligence, because due diligence is the review, so that is a moderate assurance, right? Due diligence, right? So due diligence is a moderate assurance, but a forensic is an agreed upon procedure. And because it's an agreed upon procedure, the examiner is telling us it's a no assurance engagement. And being a no assurance engagement, do we express an opinion? Do we offer any assurance to the management, everyone, in forensic? No. So is the para one clear to all of you? Okay, the para two. What is forensic? How you go about forensic? This will normally involve, I'm reading the para two, right? This will normally involve determining an appropriate value or quantifying a loss as discussed above. What is the focal point of forensic? An appropriate value or quantifying a loss. We perform forensic because of a fraud which must have taken place in a company. I hope you know the scope of forensic. Just like due diligence. When were we performing due diligence? When there was a merger or an acquisition. Now, when are we performing forensic? When there is a fraud. So when there is a fraud in a company, you will be hired as a forensic accountant or you will be hired as a forensic auditor. So what will the forensic auditor do? The forensic auditor will quantify the loss which the company must have suffered because of the fraud. This is quite distinct from an assurance engagement in which the engagement team will review the amount determined by the client. When you're performing the audit, the purpose of the audit is to review the amount which has been determined by the management. For example, the management determined the impairment loss. So the auditor will review the impairment loss, or the management has calculated the depreciation. So auditor will review the depreciation expense. But because it's a forensic investigation, it is an agreed upon procedure. So are you just reviewing the amount of loss? No, you are quantifying a loss, which is very, very different. You are quantifying the loss, you are determining the loss. Are you finding the difference between forensic and audit? So in forensic, you need to determine the amount yourself from scratch, from zero. Forensic. In the audit, you just review the amount which the management has developed. So who prepares the financial statement in the audit? The management. And when you go to the audit, you just perform a review of the financial statements prepared by the management. But when you are performing a forensic investigation or a forensic accounting or a forensic audit, you need to do it from zero. You need to determine the loss yourself. Is that clear to everyone? So is the management determining the loss, or is the forensic accountant determining the loss himself? Is that clear? Para 2, everyone? Are you sound on the para 2? Are you sound between the difference between audit and a forensic? Okay, great. Para 3, I'll make a summary. Para 3, from here. As an agreed upon procedure, the forensic accountant will normally prepare a report for the client. So you will prepare a report for a client, that's good. You will prepare a report for a client that sets out their findings. So what will you have in the report? Not an opinion. You will have in your report the findings based on the scope of the agreed, based upon the scope in the engagement letter. Now, normally, when you're performing a forensic accounting service, you need to share with the client your findings. So what will be in the report? In the report, you will have the findings. The report will contain findings. Now, because it's a fraud, so the report will contain finding on who did it, who did it, who did the fraud. The report contains the finding how it happened. The report contains the finding on amount of loss. And the report also contains recommendations to avoid fraud in future. So the report also contains recommendations to avoid fraud in future. So look at this bracket I just wrote in the live webinar. This one. Let me highlight that in blue. So is everyone clear what will be the report about? The report will contain findings about who did it, how it happened, the amount of loss, how the fraud occurred, and how to avoid the reoccurrence of fraud in future. So is that an interesting report? Is that quite a important report for the management in terms of the findings? It's not an opinion, right? It's not an opinion. Next paragraph. It may be that a witness statement or a witness report for submission to the court is required in addition to or instead of a report to clients. See this statement. This is the most important statement. The most important statement. A witness report for submission to court. As an auditor performing a forensic accounting, you may be asked to appear as a witness in the court. For example, what if the management wants to take the culprit to the court, the culprit who did the fraud, and the management wants to take the culprit to the court for justice? Now, if the management takes the culprit to the court, who have gathered evidence about who did it and how it happened and the amount of loss? Who have gathered the evidence? The auditor. So do you believe auditor is an expert witness who have gathered evidence about the scenario? So the court will like the auditor to come to the court and present the finding. So uh, the court the court may request the auditor to appear as a witness, as an expert witness to share the evidence gathered. Is that clear to everyone? So can the auditor be requested to appear in the court as an expert witness because he gathered the evidence on who did it, how it happened, and the amount of loss, right? So do you believe that expert witness is an important area of forensic investigation? But it may be or maybe not. Does every time the management takes the culprit to the court? No. There are so many times there is an out of court settlement. There are so many times there is an out of court settlement. But if there is an in court settlement, then as an auditor, you need to appear as an expert witness. When you read the article, page number 3, the examiner has covered a paragraph on expert witness, so you can read that out and you will assure that you know exactly what is the role of an expert witness. Next para. However, when planning the investigation, when you are planning the forensic investigation, it is likely to be similar to planning an audit or any other assurance engagement. So how you plan the audit? Exactly the same way you plan the forensic. Now, when you're planning the audit, you plan for your timetable, you plan for your resources, you plan for your scope, right? So when you're planning for forensic, so you plan for your scope, you plan for your resources, your size of team, how much time you have. So exactly the same phenomena of planning you have in audit, you will have the same phenomena of planning in forensic. Planning will commence with a meeting with the client. So you will commence the planning with a meeting with the client because the client will tell you how the fraud took place, in which the engagement team will develop an understanding of the issue. So you will develop an understanding of the issue and actions taken by the client. So the client will have a meeting with you and the client will guide you about how the fraud took place, who was the whistleblower, who informed the client of the fraud, and what actions have the management taken since the fraud took place. So will the auditor be interested in knowing what actions have the management taken since the fraud took place before hiring them as an auditor? So are you clear with the paragraphs I read with you from the article so far? So what's the summary? Do we have any assurance level in forensic? Quick answers, please. Do we have any assurance level in forensic? No. Okay. Uh, when we perform forensic, so do we give a very detailed report to the management, a very detailed report which covers who did it, how it happened, amount of fraud? Okay. Uh, do we perform planning of forensic investigation, and do planning of forensic investigation is same to the planning of an audit? Okay, that's great. So we covered lots of aspects about forensic, which I will make a summary quickly before we start with the past paper. Okay, moving on to the next aspect. Okay, the next 2 points, which is important to be put from the page number 3 and page number 4 on the main file. Okay, let's read the next 2 points. The key part of planning is to confirm exactly what format the output is required in and exactly what matters are required to be covered in. Because it's an agreed upon procedure, so you need to ask management what sort of things they need in the report. Is it an audit report which has a prescribed format? No, this is not an audit report which has a prescribed format given in ISA 700. Because it's an agreed upon procedure, so you need to confirm exactly what format the output required is in. So will you discuss with management what sort of things they need in the report? Do they want recommendations in the report, or do they don't want any recommendation? Do they want who did it and how it happened, or do they don't want this? So who will confirm the out format of the output? The management, right? So is there any prescribed format of forensic report? Is there any prescribed format of forensic report just like an auditor report? Exactly, no. Good answers. Next, last para. The audit team will agree with client what access to information or personals will be required, and this will be arranged. So before you start forensic investigation, you will agree with client access to information. Is that important that you agree with client your access to information because you're conducting a fraudulent investigation? So you will need access to information. So you need to agree with client the access to information prior to taking on the engagement. You will agree with client the access to information. Remember this point. Remember this point will help you. So prior to starting of engagement, you need to agree the format of the report. You need to agree your access to information. You need to agree with the client uh, what they want in the report. That's one perspective, right? I hope you got clarity on this. Okay, now moving on towards few of the last things we need to discuss from the examiner article. This was page number 3 and 4. The last, before we wrap up this page, we are doing this for purpose, right? The last paragraph. Based on above, based upon above, the team will design procedures that will enable them to meet the requirement of the client. So the team will design the procedures. How will they gather evidence about who did it, how it happened, and the amount of loss? This may or may not include the test of controls, depending upon the circumstances. There would be no need to perform test of controls when valuing a business, a matrimonial dispute. However, testing controls will be a key to determining how the fraud took place. If you are investigating the amount of loss, do you need to perform a test of control? Perhaps no. But if you are determining how the fraud took place, do you need to perform test of controls to investigate how the fraud took place? Because there must be some weak controls. So when you are determining the amount of loss, you don't need to perform DOCs. But when you are determining how it took place, you might need to. So you need to design the procedures. Now, give me quick summaries before I move to the last part and we start with the exam paper. Summary of what we have discussed so far. The first quick summary is that forensic is an agreed upon procedure. Will you remember that? Agreed upon procedure. And being an agreed upon procedure, there is no assurance. There is no assurance. As a forensic accountant, you might need to appear as an expert witness in court. You might need to appear as an expert witness in court. You should plan the forensic. You should plan the forensic in same way as of audit. There is no format of forensic report. So the content of report. So the content of report should be agreed. Should be agreed with should be agreed with management. Should be agreed with management. You should also agree. You should also agree with management the access to information. Agree with management the access to information, and finally, you should design procedures to identify. You should design procedures to gain evidence. So I think that's the key summary, right? What we have discussed in the last 10 minutes. That's the summary of the paragraphs above. Is that clear to everyone? Right? Okay. Let's move on to the last aspects of things from examiner article. This was basically page number 3 and page number 4 summary of the article. I hope once you read the article, this summary will help you. Okay, the last thing I want to discuss from the examiner article before taking on the paper. Examiner has given the procedures on page number 4 and 5 of the article, right? So I just want to focus on that because procedure is a very regular topic which comes in exam paper on forensic. So procedures are given on page number 4 and 5. So I just want to spend 5 quick minutes on this before I start with the exam paper. Okay, on the page number 4 and 5 of the article which you will be reading, you will find a heading known as procedures. Procedures are regularly examined in every forensic question, so it's better you know them. See, I'm reading what's in front of your screen. Any method of obtaining evidence, any method of obtaining evidence, any method of obtaining evidence can be used in forensic accounting. This is not a limited assurance engagement. This is not a limited assurance engagement, right? I hope you know what is a limited assurance engagement, moderate assurance. This is not a limited assurance engagement in which procedures are likely to be restricted to inquiry and analytical procedure. So is it a limited assurance engagement? No, it is a agreed upon procedure. So any method of obtaining evidence can be used. I hope you know the methods of obtaining evidence from your F8 paper: inquiry, inspection, observation, recalculation, reperformance, a confirmation letter, analytical procedures. I hope you know the list of procedures you used to do in the AA paper, everyone, right? Okay, good. So can we perform any procedure in forensic, or are the procedures limited in forensic? Can we perform any, everyone? We can perform any, right? Good. Next. Forensic engagements will include a detailed and wholesale review of all documentations and electronic evidence available. You're conducting forensic. Forensic means deep investigation. Forensic means something deep. So when you're performing forensic, it includes detailed review of documentation and electronic evidence. You don't perform forensic on a sample basis as you do the audit. You perform audit on a sample basis, right? But forensic is not done on a sample basis. You perform you perform audit on a material basis. Forensic is not done on a material basis. In forensic, you look after everything, all, all. The opinion given by the expert accountant must be reasoned and backed by evidence. So if you say who did it, it should be reasoned and backed by evidence. If you say how it happened, it must be reasoned and backed by evidence. If you say the amount of loss, it must be reasoned and backed by evidence. So please, whatever you do in forensic, it must be reasoned and backed by evidence. Is that important? Their opinion cannot be objective if only based on what they are told. They must corroborate the information. In a forensic investigation, can you just rely on what the management is telling you? Is that forensic? So your opinion cannot be objective if only based on what they are told. They must corroborate the information. Corroborate means they must investigate the information. So is everyone clear on the scope of forensic investigation? So should you look into every document, or should you just rely on the management? You should corroborate the management. You should investigate the management because you're conducting a forensic investigation, right? Right? Electronic evidence, obviously, technology, Muzammil. When you go to the client, everything is in the laptop, everything is in the computer, everything is in the form of a data analytics, robotics, artificial intelligence. We're living in a technological era, right? Electronic evidence. Next paragraph. Uh, to be awarded marks in the exam, your procedure cannot be vague. Did I give you a definition of a procedure prior to a break? ASP, will you remember that? So that your procedure is not vague. They must be specific enough that an engagement team could actually follow your instruction. You should write your procedures in a way as if you're writing it for a junior. And if a junior reads your procedure, he can do exactly what you're trying to tell him. Is that clear? For example, it would not be sufficient to write interview the suspect. It would not be sufficient to write interview the suspect. You must suggest questions that should be asked of the suspect in interview, depending upon the circumstances. For example, the suspect could be asked to explain their job role and what excess that gives them to system, cash and inventory. You cannot just say interview the suspect. You should write a proper sentence in the exam that what will be the objective of the interview, or why are you interviewing the suspect, what you want to ask the interview. So you should put the question you want to ask the suspect. So examiner does not like you just write interview the suspect, but examiner is giving you a suggestion how you should write it. You should put the question you will be asking to the suspect to make it a proper statement. Is that clear? So is this article important? Is this if you read the article the way I am reading in the session, para by para, will that really help you develop a good mindset on forensic rather than you go to a textbook and waste time? So please ensure that you continue reading this article. There is plenty more in this article, but within the limitation of the webinar, I cannot just go over things. When you read this article, forensic, we have reached page number 4. We have done the procedures, page number 4. We have gone down ethical principles. Please do read the ethical principles. What can be some ethical dilemmas if you're offering a forensic investigation to your existing client? Please read that out, and then it ends a final note. So please ensure that back at home, you also read the page number 5. On the page number 5, you will get some ethical dilemmas. We have already covered those in the day 2. If you get a question on ethical and professional issues on the page number 5, uh, what if what if you're offering forensic to your existing client? And a lot of time questions have come in the past paper where you're offering forensic to your existing client. Now, in this case, what can be the ethical issues? Don't be worried about, because the examiner has explained them in the page number 5. So if you read the page number 5, you exactly know what can be some of the ethical dilemmas if you're offering forensic to your existing client. So will you be reading the page 5 and ends the article? So how many pages in total you have to read of the article? 3, 4, 5. 3, right? So read page 3 to 5 of the article. And this is wonderful preparation of your knowledge for exam paper. Is that clear, everyone? Okay, now let's start the journey of the past papers. Practice. Let's start with the practice now. So I hope you have a bit of mindset now on forensic, and that will really help me with the practice phase starting now. We're taking on the September-December 19 paper, but there are old papers as well, and you need to follow the old papers. I will be sharing them with you. I've already guided you, right? So in the session today, in the session, I am doing with you September-December 19, question number 3. But for your assignments, you have to do very old papers, June 13, question number 2B. So I'll share that with you on the WhatsApp group, and also June 15, question number 3C, right? So you have to do them as assignments. Okay, let's start the journey. Okay, well, now when you look at the past papers on forensic, what exactly examiner asks? Is there any common things, just like due diligence? What exactly examiner asks? And the answer to this question is very straightforward. Every time a question comes on forensic, it will have procedures. You cannot find a question on forensic without procedure. So procedure is the most important part of a question on forensic, is the most important part. Besides procedures, what else the examiner asks you? In June 13, procedures. In June 15, procedures. In September, December 19, procedures. So procedures is a regular feature, right, of things. Beside that, the examiner asks you matters to consider when invited to perform a forensic investigation. This has come a couple of times. I hope you know this syllabus area. I've covered this syllabus area in my previous webinar in December, which is practice management. I hope you know the syllabus area C, practice management. Matters to consider when you're invited to a tender. Matters to consider when you're performing a service to your existing client. So if you get an invitation from a company to offer forensic investigation, what matters will you consider prior to accepting the forensic investigation? I hope you've covered a topic like such in your prior preparations. Have you? Have you not? I've covered practice management in my previous syllabus areas, in my previous webinars in December. Right, so matters to consider when invited to perform a forensic investigation. These are the two common phenomena. Auditor and management responsibilities for fraud. Auditors and management responsibilities for fraud. So you should have an idea of what is the auditor responsibilities for fraud and what are management responsibilities, the ISA 240. That is a very common asked situation in forensic, because forensic is about fraud. So examiner test your knowledge about that. And There could be some uncommon things. These are the most common things on your screen which you're looking for. There can be uncommon things which we can discuss from the September December 19 paper. Okay, let's start the exercise. Now, when you look at the September paper and the December 19 paper, question number 3, let's see what was exactly in it. Okay, now can you see the question paper in front of you, the question number 3 of the September December 19 exams in front of your screen, everyone? 3A. Can you see it? Okay, look at the requirement 3A. In the requirement 3A, the examiner is saying, evaluate the methods which should be considered before your firm accepts the invitation to perform a forensic investigation. 8 marks. This is a very regular question, right? In the AAA paper, it could come on any topic. Evaluate the matters which should be considered before your firm accepts the invitation to perform a due diligence investigation. Evaluate the matters which should be considered before your firm accepts the invitation to perform a fill in the blank. It could be anything, right? But what you should know as a student, you should know matters to consider before your firm accepts invitation. As simple as that. Whichever service is asked. Matters to consider when your firm is invited to a new audit client. You must have seen a question like that in the past paper. So generally, the area I bracketed in red is important. Matters which should be considered before your firm accepts the invitation. And the invitation can be about audit, the invitation can be about forensic, the invitation can be about due diligence, the invitation can be about any service, right? True, false. So the invitation can be about anything, right? But you should know the matters which you should consider before your firm accepts the invitation. So this is a very regular feature of your past papers. Every matter which you consider before accepting the invitation is worth 2 marks. I'll be showing you the marking scheme, right? So that's the first question. I'll be doing a scanning of the question paper on my Word file shortly, but that's the first 8 marks question. You move down, the next one, next requirement, recommend the procedures. So you need to recommend the procedures in the second part, and you need to recommend the procedures to quantify the inventory loss. So are you making procedures on who did it and how it happened, or are you making procedures to quantify the amount of loss? So how many marks we have for procedures? 6 marks. So you need to make procedures on quantification of the inventory loss, right? I'll just be sharing the marking schemes, right? Just wait for that. The next point, evaluate the deficiencies in the internal control system. Is that not an F8 question which came for the first time in September, December 19 exams? Is that not a straightforward question at a AAA level? Evaluate the deficiencies in the system. Can you go prepared for a question like such? Can you go prepared for a question like such in exam paper? No, because you will be given the deficiencies in the paper, right? And you just need to identify them and you need to explain why it is a deficiency. So evaluate the deficiency in the internal control system and explain how they contributed to the fraud, how the deficiency contributed to the fraud together with recommendation. So you need to evaluate the deficiency, just like an F8 paper, how they contributed to the fraud, how the deficiency contributed to the fraud, and recommendation, how to avoid it. 6 marks. I'll be giving you the split of the marks. Is it like an easy question, evaluate the deficiencies in internal control system? Is it a case specific question or is it a rote learn question? It's case specific, right? Is everyone clear with the question? Number 2, evaluate the deficiencies. Are you fine with it? Okay, comes to the last one. Explain the difficulties arising from for the management and the auditor with respect to discovering frauds. What difficulties can the management face when they are discovering fraud? And what difficulties can the auditor face when they're discovering fraud? Management, auditor. What difficulties? What difficulties will the management face and the auditor face when discuss? Is that not knowledge? Is that not knowledge for 5 marks? What difficulties will the auditor face? What difficulties will the management face when they're discovering frauds? 5 marks. So how many parts are there to this question? 25 marks question. But is it divided into many parts? So let's do a quick marking scheme analysis, and then I'll start to give you a quick answer for half the question. Okay, let's start the journey for this September December 19 question number 3 of 25 marks. Now I'll just copy the requirements of this question to my Word file so we can do a proper analysis of the marking scheme. Okay, so let me copy this question onto my main Word file, and let's start the analysis then. Okay, can you all see the question in front of you, September December 19? The first requirement, evaluate the matters which should be considered before your firm accepts the invitation, right? So whenever a question comes on this, each matter is worth 2 marks. Is that clear? Each matter is worth 2 marks, which you should consider before your firm accepts the invitation. So how many marks, how many matters will you be writing for an 8 marks answer? 8 marks divided by 2 is equal to 4 matters to complete the answer, right? That is the marking scheme for evaluate the matters, right? Go to the next question. Recommend the procedures. I hope you're clear on the marking scheme of procedures. We just had it prior to the break. Every time the examiner asks you to recommend a procedure anywhere in the AAA paper, 1 mark per procedure. So how many procedures will you be writing? You have 6 marks divided by 1, so you will be writing 6 procedures in all, not 7, right? So that's the marking scheme for procedures. I hope you're clear with that for the entire paper. The next, for the first time, but common sense, examiner is saying evaluate the deficiency. Number 1, evaluate the deficiency. Will that deficiency be in the case study? You just need to identify it and evaluate the deficiency. Why it is a deficiency? Comma. Can you see the comma? Comma. And explain how they contributed to fraud. How they contributed to fraud. How the deficiency contributed to fraud. So when you are reading a case, suppose you found a deficiency. You will tell why it is a deficiency. And then you will say, okay, how this deficiency contributed to a fraud. Number 2. And number 3, recommendation. Recommendation to prevent a reoccurring. So you have to give a recommendation. So how many marks you have? 6. Now listen to the marking scheme carefully. Number 1, evaluate the deficiency. 1 mark. How it contributed. When you tell examiner how it contributed to the fraud, you will get another 1 mark. So if you pick one deficiency from the case study, right? So suppose you pick one deficiency. You pick a deficiency from the exam paper. Now for that deficiency, just 1 minute, let me change the spelling. For you pick a deficiency in the exam paper, right? 1. And when for a deficiency you tell why it is a deficiency, you evaluate the deficiency and you say how it contributed to fraud. So how many marks will you get for a deficiency in total? 2. You first evaluate the deficiency and then you tell how it contributed. So when you write a paragraph for a deficiency, how many things should be in one paragraph for a deficiency? Number 1, why it is a deficiency, and number 2, how it contributed to a fraud. Is that clear to everyone? So one deficiency is worth how many marks? 2. And then for every deficiency, you need to give a recommendation. So a recommendation is worth 1 mark. So if one student picks 2 deficiencies, will he be able to take 6 marks? You pick 2 deficiencies. For every deficiency, you will first tell why, how it contributed, and recommendation. Just for example, if I want to demonstrate this, suppose, not this question, right? But just to make your mindset open, there is no physical security at warehouse. For example, there is no physical security at warehouse, right? Now you pick it up as a problem. Now, how would I go scoring my marks? I'll say there is no physical security at warehouse. I pick it up. Now I need to tell examiner why, how it contributed, and recommendations. See, if I write a paragraph under this, I'll first tell examiner if there is no physical security at the warehouse, the inventory items in the warehouse will become susceptible to theft, particularly particularly the small inventory items, right? This is not the problem in the case study, but I'm just telling you how you go about doing a question like such. So if there is no physical security at the warehouse, the inventory items in the warehouse will become susceptible to theft, particularly the small inventory items, which are more prone to theft. The have I explained examiner why it is a deficiency? Will I get my 1 mark here? Why it is a deficiency? I change the paragraph and I tell examiner how it contributed. The recent the recent incident of theft from warehouse occurred because of no security. So how it contributed to the fraud? Because there was no security. So no security contributed to the fraud. So the recent incident of theft from the warehouse occurred because of no security. Had there been security, the fraud would have been avoided. So the recent incident of theft from the warehouse occurred because of no security in place at time of fraud. So I'll get my 1 more mark how it contributed to the fraud. And then I tell examiner there should be, the recommendation is more simple, right? There should be proper physical security or the CCTV cameras at the warehouse to avoid any such thefts in future, or the CCTV cameras in the warehouse, at the warehouse. So the recommendation for 1 mark. So 3 marks. So this is exactly what you have to do in the September December 19 paper. Are you getting it? You will pick up a problem, you will pick up a deficiency, and for every deficiency you will tell why it is a deficiency, how it contributed to a fraud in the question, and what can be done to avoid a reoccurrence. Is that clear? The marking scheme, everyone? Right? So is the example clear to all of you to understand the marking schemes? Right? Okay, good. So this is a question on evaluate the deficiency. But do you believe this question is more like an F8 paper, though it came for the first time and was very easy for finding a deficiency from a question and telling why it's a deficiency? Is it not an easygoing question if you have done your F8 paper in a very good manner, everyone? Right? Move towards the last question. Explain the difficulties which would arise for management and auditor in respect of discovering fraud. Difficulties. Every difficulty is worth 1 mark. Each difficulty the management will face or the auditor. Each difficulty is 1 mark. So how many difficulties you need to write irrespective if you write more for management and less for auditor? 5 marks divided by 1 is equal to 5 difficulties. Right? So just let's complete this part. This part has no connection with the case, right? Do you believe this is just a journal question? The examiner is asking what difficulties, explain the difficulties arising for management and auditor with respect to discovering frauds. So what difficulties? 5 marks. I believe if I can just give you a quick brainstorming on this, you have to put paragraphs, right? I'm just giving you the 5 key points. I think it's difficult for management first to it's difficult for management to discover fraud because mostly the fraud is done with perfection, and the fraud is done with an element of concealment, and it makes the discovery of the fraud difficult, right? So normally the fraud is done with perfection and concealment, making the fraud very difficult for the management. Number two, there might be collusion in fraud, and when there is a collusion in fraud, it becomes more complex to investigate. So if a single person has done fraud, perhaps it's more easier to find it. But if there is a collusion of people, then obviously it becomes more complex exercise for the management to take it. Number three, it's difficult for the management to discover fraud because the internal control system is not a guarantee. It's not a guarantee. It's just an assurance. It's not a guarantee, rather assurance. Do you believe if you have internal control system, you have a guarantee that every fraud will be discovered? Is that the case? Do you believe internal control system is an assurance or a guarantee? Internal control system is not a guarantee, right? Rather than an assurance. So can there be a human error and you overlook a fraud? There might be an overlooking of fraud because of a human error. The internal auditor might overlook a fraud because of a human error. Even yes, management override of controls. If the management themselves is involved in fraud, then discovering fraud becomes difficult. So, are there logical reasons why there would be difficulties for management to discover a fraud? Because the internal control system might not be a guarantee. Collusions might make it complex. They might overlook something mistakenly, and the management overrides of control. For the auditor, finding the fraud is very difficult because auditor performs audit on material basis. Auditor performs audit on sample basis. So what if the fraud does not comes in your sample? What if the fraud is in the immaterial transactions? And if the fraud is in the immaterial transaction, the auditor is only picking the material transactions. So do you believe there are limitations for the auditor in detecting a fraud, in discovering a fraud? And the auditor was not present in the company, right, throughout the year. The auditor only came after the year end, and he has very less time. The auditor has very less time, and the auditor comes after the year end, and he is in a panic to complete things quickly. Comes after year end. So do you believe all these factors contribute to the difficulties for the auditor in terms of discovering fraud? You need to write just 5 in total. I've given you something like 8 difficulties. You need to write 5 in total in a paragraph form. Keep every paragraph to just like 2 sentences, right? Don't drag a paragraph. Otherwise, the 5 marks answer will become too lengthy. Just in like 2 sentences, explain one difficulty. Is that clear to everyone? Explain the difficulties for management and auditor discovering fraud for 5 marks. This was a sheer knowledge. I hope you're clear on that, right? Okay. So please ensure you complete the part you complete the part on deficiencies in the internal control system. I hope you can complete the deficiency in internal control systems yourself, identifying 2 deficiencies from the case and explaining them. No, Dureshwar, you cannot write your answer in a point form. I'm only writing it in the point form because it's a webinar and we have limited time. If I write it in the paragraph form, I can only complete just one question. I just mentioned that after completing my bullets that you need to choose 5 and write them in 1 to 2 sentences. Nothing can be written in bullets in the P7 paper except for procedures. Is that clear, Dureshwar? Okay. Evaluate the matters which should be considered when your firm is invited to perform a forensic investigation service. Do you know this list of? Do you know this list in journal? If I just take this question to my next page for proper analysis, The first requirement for 8 marks, evaluate the matters which should be considered before your firm accepts the invitation. Now let's see, is the case helping us here? Let's go back to the case study. Okay, can you just read the case study from you are a manager up to up to this point, matter further, the para 1 and para 2. I'm giving you 2 minutes. Just read the para 1 and para 2. See if you can find some matters which should be considered before your firm accepts the invitation, or else we need to write the matters from the book knowledge. Your time starts now, right? I hope you're all reading. Okay, if you have read it, the question is very straightforward. Evaluate the matters which should be considered when your firm is invited to when your firm is invited. Obviously, the question is of a journal nature, and you should know the matters beforehand, but you can find some matters from the case study even. Normally, if you look at this case study, before we look at the journal points, you are a manager in the forensic department of your firm, cafe, and company. You have received a request from Bear company about an inventory fraud which was brought to the attention of the company's audit committee by a whistleblower. So there was an inventory fraud. Bear and Company is not currently a client of your firm. So is this the first matter? It's not a client of your firm. Will you perform a customer due diligence? Will you check the client integrity before you take on Bear as a client? Had it been your client, if Bear had been your audit client, would you perform customer due diligence? Would you perform the client integrity? No. But is Bear an audit client? No. So what is the first matter to consider when you are accepting this? The first matter, if I can just give you a bulleted answer, number one, the first matter would be the client screening because it's a new client, or the client due diligence. You will perform a due diligence of the client to ensure that it's a good client or a bad client, to confirm is Bear a good client or not. So you just want to do the screening right. You normally do screening right for a new client. You have knowledge of that, everyone, right? So it was a new client, so we need to do a screening. So is this a case specific? Is this a case specific matter which I got from the case study? So will be much rewarding to me. Okay, let's read the case further. Okay, Bear Company manufactures and sells part used in the automotive industry. The audit committee would like Cafe to perform a forensic investigation to quantify the loss as a result of the inventory and to recommend improvement. So the audit committee is setting your scope. The audit committee would like you to quantify the loss and to tell them the improvements in the internal control. That's what they want you to do. In addition, the audit committee has mentioned that although the quantification of loss is to form the basis of the insurance claim, the matter has been reported to police who will be investigating the matter further. Do we know with clarity will the matter be taken to the court or not? Do we have clarity on that? They have reported the matter to police, but will they be taking this matter to court or not? Do we have clarity? So should we consider this matter before accepting the invitation, that will there be any court proceedings? Will we be involved in a court proceeding? Will you consider that before you accept this invitation? Will you also seek a clarity on your scope? I think the scope given in the exam paper is to quantify the loss and to recommend improvement. But should you ask audit committee, do you need anything else or that is it? Or do you want us to identify who did it and how it happened? Or you just want us to tell you what is the loss? So a lot of matters are very journal, which you should know as a student for AAA, that matters which should be considered before your firm accepts the invitation. Now, some of the matters can come from the case, as we got one of them from the case. But other matters can be very journal, which you can link to the case. For example, you can think about that before you accept the invitation, I would be concerned about my scope. Before I accept the invitation, I would be concerned about my fees. Before I accept the invitation, I would be concerned about the deadlines. Before the acceptance of my invitation, I would be concerned about whether there will be a court proceeding or not. Uh, Before I accept the invitation, I would be concerned about my competence level, right? And the list goes on. Now, I believe this is a journal list, but this can be linked to a case study to make it sound specific. We already have 1 point client screening from the case study, and then I wrote almost like 5 here. So this is a list of like 6. We just need 4 to wrap up the answer. It's not the client, right, Mahnur? If it would have been my audit client, then there would have been ethical threats. It's not my audit client, so there will be no ethical threats, right? Had it been my audit client, then there would have been some threats like self-review, self-interest, but nothing in this case, right? I hope you're clear on that. Okay, now just let me go through it quickly. Uh, if I want to make my answer very specific for 8 marks, how would I go about? I would keep in my list number one, um, client screening, because that is linked to a case. I hope you all agree. I would keep in my case the court proceeding point, because that's very particular. I need to see a clarity that whether I will be going to a court or not, right? So will I be an expert witness in the court? Will the management wants me to be an expert witness in the court? Will they take the matter to the court? I just discussed that with you, right, in the knowledge part. Okay. So client screening, I'll keep in my list of 8 marks. I'll keep the court proceeding, clarity from audit committee that should I be going or not, will there be a court proceeding or not, etc. I think another thing which needs clarity from the management, which I can keep in my list, is competence. I can connect competence with the case study. I can connect competence with the case study. See, it's written over here. You are a manager in the forensic department of Cafe and Company. So does that means my audit firm have a separate forensic accounting department? And does that means we have the desired competence as an audit firm to perform a forensic investigation service? So can I link my competence with a forensic department of your firm, everyone? Can I make it case linked, right? So I can connect the point of competence cafe with cafe having a forensic department. So do we have competence? Yes, we have. So we can connect that with the case study that we have as a firm, we have competence because we have a separate forensic accounting department. Uh, we can ask management about deadlines because deadlines are not given in the case study. We can ask about what are deadlines before we accept the engagement, what are deadlines. We can also discuss with management the fee level. Is the management willing to give us a good amount of fees? The fee levels can be discussed before we accept the invitation. If we get good fees, then we'll accept. If not, we'll not. Yes, you have to connect, right, the competence with the firm having a forensic audit department because it's relatable to the case. So you will tell examiner because the audit firm has a separate forensic accounting department, so they have the desired competence to perform the forensic accounting service. So that will become a matter before you consider the invitation. So is everyone clear on this type of question? Matters that should be considered before your firm accepts the invitation. Should you know the journal list of matters like scope, fees, deadline, and you can relate them with the paper case study, everyone, right? So as a student, you should know the matters. As a student, you should know the journal list of matters which you consider before accepting, and you connect them with the case study. You make them relatable with the case study. So fees, connect that with the fees. The fees will be in accordance with the scope of the work. The fees will be in accordance with how much work the management wants you to perform, and so on and so forth, right? So you need to develop an 8 marks answer for it. Okay, if I can just write 1 and 2 paragraphs for you quickly and before we take on the procedures and wrap up the answer. Now, suppose if I'm writing the answer, I'll first start with client screening and see how I write my 2 marks answer. I'll write under this, Bear is a new client for the audit firm. So the audit firm must investigate the client for screening. So the audit firm must investigate the client for screening whether the client is the client has a good background or history. The client has a good background or history or sorry, just 1 minute. Whether the client has a good background and history or not. So you should screen out the client because this is the first time you're doing it. There is a new client for the audit firm, so the audit firm must investigate the client for screening whether the client has a good background and history or not, because Cafe would not like would not like to take on a client whose integrity is doubtful, So would you like to take on a bad company who has a very bad image in the market, who has a very bad repute in the market, or a company which is known for money laundering or tax investigations? Would you like to take on Bear if it is sound, if it is good? So would you do the client screening first before taking on Bear? Okay, the next point you can write is scope. Before you accept your invitation, uh, as an audit firm, Cafe should Cafe should discuss with the audit committee the clarity on scope of work to be performed, as this will help in determination of fees. Cafe should discuss with audit committee the clarity on scope of work to be performed, as this will help in determination of fees. Clarity should be taken. Clarity should be taken with regards to whether the forensic audit team will be required to appear as an expert witness in court. Clarity must be taken with regards to whether the forensic team from Cafe will be required to appear as an expert witness in court, or whether the matter will be settled out of court, right? You can also discuss another matter before you accept the invitation is the intended users. You can ask management that who will be the intended users of my report on forensic. Uh, Cafe should consider the intended users of the forensic report to ensure who the report will be addressed to, or the overall exposure of the engagement. It seems that the insurance company will be using the report because you have to claim it. It seems that the insurance company will be using the report alongside the audit committee from Bear. Something like this, right? I'm just trying to sketch out a rough answer here, just to give you a track how you develop every point as a matter before accepting the invitation. So client screening can be one matter, the scope can be one matter, the intended users can be one matter, and you continue on this space. Uh, the deadlines can be a matter, your competence can be a matter, and so on and so forth. So I hope you're getting a track of how you frame out this answer, right? Is that clear to everyone? Okay, that's great. Okay, now if you move from this part, which is a very regular feature of the AAA paper, and I've already covered this matters in my December webinar. So please ensure that you watch my December webinar. I guess it was day 3 or day 4 when I covered the practice management. So if you even watch that, you will be very clear about developing a list of matters when you are invited to a tender, either from a new client or from an existing client. So please do watch that as well, right? Okay. The next thing, which this question was asking us, apart from these matters, we've already done the brainstorming on difficulties. We've already done the brainstorming on how to pick up the deficiencies in this question. Recommend the procedures. 6 marks to quantify the amount of loss. Let's put time on it because students technically are very bad on procedures. Try to understand one thing. In this case, the examiner is asking you to recommend the procedures, right, which you should be performing in order to quantify the inventory loss, right? Now, suppose you are a student and you are sitting in the exam hall and you start to write a procedure. Number one, you start to write a procedure, discuss with audit committee, who discuss with the audit committee their findings on who are the main culprits behind this fraud. Am I addressing the requirement of the examiner? Is my procedure addressing quantification of the loss? Or am I writing a procedure on who did it? So will I get marks for this procedure? No, it will straight away be cross. Next, you're sitting in the exam hall and you make procedure, uh, perform a test of control, perform test of controls to evaluate the deficiencies in the internal control systems which led to fraud. Am I writing the right procedure? Because my purpose is to quantify the loss. None of the procedure is focusing on quantification of loss. So I should work on the inventory loss. I should work on procedures which give me the quantification of loss. I hope you're clear on that. This is a big cross. So who did it? How it happened? If the examiner is asking for it, then write it. If it is not asking for it, then don't waste time on it. You will not get any marks. So my purpose here is to work on inventory. My purpose is to work on inventory loss. 6 procedures, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How would I know inventory loss? Can I rote learn and go to the exam hall? No. Inventory loss, I need to read the case. And from the case, I need to find my procedures. So let's read the paragraph from the case about inventory loss. Okay, back to the case. Next paragraph. Okay, I'm just giving you 2 minutes. If you can start to read the how did this inventory fraud happen? Uh, you can find the deficiencies in the internal control system because you have a 6 marks answer for that. But my current focus in the webinar is to find procedures which we can write on quantifying how much inventory was actually stolen. So I'm giving you 2 minutes. If you can read from having to notes. 3 minutes, not two. It's a big paragraph. Start reading it. See if you can find some procedures. Okay, have you been able to read through the case which is telling you about the problems in the systems, the issues in the system, which basically led to fraud? I hope you can find the internal control deficiencies for a 6 marks answer and how that deficiencies resulted into a fraud. I think they're very easier one in this case paper. But let's see what is the trick for finding procedures. Okay, okay, let's find the clue. I have brought the case on my Word file. I hope you can see the Word file now. On my Word file, you can see the case has been copied and pasted here. Okay, I hope you can see it now. Okay, that's great. Okay, now let's do the analysis. Let's see how can we pick procedures. What's the trick? What's the technique of picking procedures around inventory loss? The warehouse manager has been working with one of the sales representative to dispatch goods to fictitious customers, which the warehouse manager has created on the dispatch system. Okay, there is a dispatch system on which you create fictitious customers. Okay, that's one thing. Number two, the sales order are input by the sales representative into the dispatch system, which is not directly linked to the invoicing and accounting system. Okay, so the sales order are input into the system. That's number two. And the fictitious customers are created on the dispatch systems, right? And you create sales order for them. Number two. Number three, after the good dispatch note is issued, so there is a document, good dispatch note is issued by the warehouse manager, the good leaves the warehouse for delivery to the fictitious customer. The sales representative cancel the original order. So the original order gets cancelled, right, in the from the system. So there is no track that you ordered or a fictitious customer order. So the sales order you input in the system later gets cancelled because it's not connected to the invoicing and accounting system, right? And a good dispatch note is issued so that you can exit the warehouse and the goods can leave the warehouse for delivery to the fictitious customer. Okay. The warehouse manager reverses the dispatch immediately so that the daily report on inventory movement used to generate invoices in sales system does not reflect the movement of goods. So immediately after dispatch, you reverse everything so that the daily report on inventory movement used to generate invoices in the sales system does not reflect the movement of goods. Now tell me, is this all happening on the system that you reverse everything, you cancel everything? Has the physical inventory moved out? But on the system, the inventory is higher than the physical inventory. Is that true? Is that false? Your physical inventory has actually gone out. So if I compare my physical inventory with my system inventory, will there be a discrepancy? As a forensic auditor, should I perform inventory count? Should I perform an inventory count? And my physical inventory count will not tally with the inventory on the system. And in that case, can I identify the number of inventory items which has been stolen? Because there will be a big difference, right? So one of the procedure which I can pick from this line is here. I'll say number one, just 1 minute. I'll say perform. See how you pick procedures in the context of the case, right? You will say perform a physical inventory count. Was the examiner telling us that in the forensic you can do any procedure because you're doing an investigation? So you will perform a physical inventory count, and you will perform a physical inventory count to confirm the inventory position, to confirm the inventory position of different inventory items, different inventory items. So you will first perform a physical inventory count to confirm the inventory position of different inventory items. You will then reconcile the uh, you will then reconcile the physical inventory position. You will then reconcile the physical inventory position with the inventory position on system to identify the to identify the differences. Is Are these differences likely to be the uh, inventory which has been put to the fictitious customers? Are you getting my point, everyone? So you perform a physical count to know how much is the physical inventory, point number one. Then once you perform the physical inventory count, you reconcile the physical inventory position with the inventory position on the system to identify the differences. Now, once you got the differences, you will uh, try to find the value of these differences. Once the differences have been identified, has been identified, has been identified, determine the value. Determine the value of the difference. Determine the value of the inventory items. Determine the value of the inventory items. So suppose there were like 10 units in the system and there were like 5 units in the physical. So what is the difference? 5. So is 5 stolen? Has 5 been stolen? Has 5 been gone to a fictitious customer? Right? What is the value of 5? What is the cost of 5? What is the book value of 5? What is the net realizable value of 5? Or once the difference has been identified, determine the value of the inventory items from determine the value of the inventory items to quantify the loss. To quantify the loss, right? You can review the price list of inventory items prior to confirming, prior to confirm, to confirm the inventory value. To confirm, you can review the price list of inventory items to confirm the accuracy of the inventory valuation. To confirm accuracy of inventory valuation. You can, once the difference has been identified, determine the value of inventory items to quantify the loss, or you can recalculate the value of inventory items to quantify the loss. So are you getting the track? Look at my procedures. Is every procedure of mine on screen helping me to get closer to the quantification of loss? Rather than you write procedures which has no relevance to quantification. And we still have 2 paragraphs to read. No others. You have to break procedures, right? In forensic, because one procedure is you perform a physical inventory count, right? And what's the purpose of the physical inventory count? To get the inventory position. Every procedure I wrote has a different purpose, right? So you perform and you get the inventory position. Then you reconcile, and reconcile, you get the difference. See, every procedure has a different reason. Then you identify the difference and you determine the value. You determine the value. And to determine the value and to determine the accuracy of the value, you review the price list. Should have come at number 3. Review the price list first, then determine the value. You can change the order. But are you getting the track of how you go into the case and read the case and find how to quantify the inventory loss, rather than you have a rote learn procedure for quantity losses, or you start making procedures on who did it and how it happened? So please remember that procedures have to come from within the case study. You cannot have a stress level for procedures. Is that clear to everyone? So every time I guide you on procedures in my even my previous webinar, I say procedure is equal to not ASP. Have I given you the full form of ASP? Right? Procedure is equal to ASP, right? But I believe with ASP, the more important thing is case specific. This is the critical success factor. If you don't write a case specific procedure, that's useless for examining team checking your paper. So read the case. There might be a clue in the case. Find the clue in the case. If you find the clue in the case, convert the clue into a procedure. So what I did with you, I just read the case. I found, sorry, I found a clue and I converted the clue into procedures. How many of them? 4 of them. And you have to continue with the list number 5 and 6. So you need to have a proper mechanism. You need to have a proper methodology to attempt questions. I hope every day, including the day today, the key learning you must have got, which you need to agree with me, is first read the requirement. First spend 2 minutes, 3 minutes on the requirement. Read the requirement, break the requirement, understand the marking scheme, read the comma, read the and once you know the requirement in 2 to 3 minutes, then you need to read the case study. And then your answer will be so good, impressive. So I think even the day today, the major thing was to understand what is the question asking, understand what is the examiner asking, break it. And that breaking helps us to know exactly what is to be done. If you don't read the case properly, you might even write procedures on who did it and how it happened, which is useless. So, has this exercise today on due diligence and forensic, again within the constraint of time, and again within the constraint of it's a free webinar, again in the constraint of it was not a regular class. I hope within the constraint, the important points, the emphasizable points were put into the logical manner. Right? So I hope you continue with the September, December 19 question in a more proper manner. And I hope you continue with the other questions recommended during the webinar. I hope you continue to read the article on forensic accounting, which was recommended today. Right? So please, the AAA paper is not a difficult paper. It is a challenging paper. But AAA paper is a paper which need right techniques. If you have the right techniques, if you have the right tips, if you have the right tricks, then you can pass the AAA paper. Imagine seriously, triple is not a difficult paper. If you can read the case, if you can extract things from the case, if you can develop your point from the case study, you can pass the AAA paper in the first attempt. But if you write the bookish knowledge, rote learn knowledge, illogical knowledge, you write everything which is not in the case study, useless. So I hope over the 4 days you must have gained confidence. We still have the final day tomorrow, which is on other assignments. I will be doing the audit of the performance information tomorrow. And we have lots of knowledge areas tomorrow. And I will be spending some time in the session tomorrow on time management, how you can improve upon your time management. I'll specifically keep 15 minutes tomorrow on time management tips, right? So be prepared for that as well. So we have another assignment tomorrow, which is audit of performance information, which is very important for your exams in 2021. And I will be spending some time on telling you why a student tends to ignore the knowledge areas, what are important knowledge areas in the AAA paper. So we have all that tomorrow. And more importantly, I will be giving you some final tips and techniques to pass your AAA paper in March, right? So I hope uh, the day 4 was effective. You found something good from the day 4. If you can just drop your quick feedbacks of on the day 4. And if you have any questions, the WhatsApp groups are there. There are WhatsApp groups to facilitate you, to help you. And I believe these WhatsApp groups is tremendous in terms of students helping students. And at times, even if when I have time, I can drop a message, I can ask you something, you can ask something to me, right? I hope these WhatsApp groups really provides you a productive platform in terms of your exam preparation as well, to find solution to your problems over the next few days to come, right? Okay, so thank you very much all for joining the live webinar. This was the fourth day today, and we have a final day coming tomorrow, which is the day 5, and which is a day which is still on other assignments. Not just on other assignments, we'll be looking at the knowledge area. I hope you can see the screen for agenda so that you know exactly what is the uh, agenda for tomorrow. Other assignments again coming tomorrow with auditor performance information, not along with that, the knowledge area. So last day, a productive day coming tomorrow. Not being a last day, I'll keep 30 minutes for the tips and techniques, which can be really helpful to you to pass the AAA paper. So please ensure you all join live tomorrow, right? Okay, that is it. Have a nice day. Study effectively and study in an organized manner. Apply the tips which has been given to you by the tutor. Have a nice day. I'll see you back tomorrow at 8:30 p.m. the Pakistan Standard Time. And once again, thank you for participating in these live webinars. I'm Kashif Kamran signing off from Advanced Audit and Assurance Practice to Pass webinar for March 21 exams, which is being organized by ACCA Pakistan. Thank you.